stay in Kiev and speak to Sonia Kush. She's the country director for Save the Children International Ukraine. Sonia, thanks so much for speaking to us. When we hear in that report about children possibly being used as a bargaining chip, is that not concerning in itself? These are the members of society we're meant to protect the most, not use them to get an advantage.
Absolutely. Children should never be used as part of negotiations or as bargaining chips. Ukrainian children have really paid such a heavy price already for this war. Some children in Ukraine have been living through war for more than 10 years now, and the rest of the country has also felt the pain. We're really concerned that children's development is really being set back. They're really losing out on the chance to get a proper education. This is going to really have long-term consequences for the rebuilding of Ukraine, for the future of Ukraine. And so it's so important that children are really supported at their time of most need right now.
And what kind of support do those children need? Are there programs that your organization has to help children affected by this war?
We're really focused on helping Ukrainian children get a good education. We had 2 years of COVID, now 3 years of war, and so many children don't know what the inside of a classroom looks like. All along the regions that are on the front line, children are not allowed to gather in person in their schools. So you have children who don't know how to interact with a teacher. They don't know what a desk is. All they know is them sitting at home by themselves trying to learn through their smartphone, for example. So we're doing a lot of, for example, shelter rehabilitation, so children can gather in a safe place, in a shelter, be with a teacher, be with their friends. And not only does that help them learn, but it also really helps them psychologically because they're with other people. They're not isolated at home, and they can be together in a class and learn. And all the kids I talk to here really talk about how they just miss going to a regular school. They miss seeing their teacher. They miss seeing their friends. So anything we can do to bring them together and make sure they're learning, I think is just such a great investment in Ukrainian children right now.
And that social interaction between such young children must also be so important. Because, Sonia, you've worked in other countries and areas which have experienced war. How do those lessons from Iraq, for example, inform your work now in Ukraine?
What we've learned from working in other conflict settings is you really need to make sure children are getting the psychological support that they need while the conflict is still going on, because it makes them that much more resilient and able to cope with everything that's happening around them. When you let stress build up in a child's body, it can affect them all the way into adulthood, even physically. So through our education programs, through every kind of program we have here in Ukraine, we're always looking at how we can provide children psychological and mental health support. They're the first ones to tell us that they really need it. And so it's, so important for us that we support them. So when this war ends, which I'm sure it will, that children can really bounce back and have a productive future to look forward to.
How important then is it to provide help to children now? Because as you say, this war will eventually end. But when it does, you don't want to have children then pass on what they've been through to their children and then grandchildren, because generational trauma is very, very real in these circumstances, isn't it?
Absolutely, which is why, we work with children, but not only children, we also work with their parents to help them cope with everything that their children are going through. Children of different ages are processing the conflict differently. So parents, if they have a 5-year-old and a 10-year-old and a 15-year-old, they're all having very different experiences of the war. And so we work with them to give them the tools and tips and techniques to make their family life better, to make their environment better, their community stronger. And we find by, working with those children now, giving them psychological support, working with their parents, giving teachers the tools and tips they need as well to give psychological support. You have to really take a whole of society approach to supporting Ukrainians in this time of conflict so that when it ends, society can come together and heal and progress, because the facts are right now that Ukrainian children are falling behind their peers in other countries around the world in terms of their learning. And that's a really tragic outcome of the war if Ukrainian children aren't reaching their full potential. every child I talk to here as well says, I want to learn, I have ambitions, I have dreams, but I don't feel right now that I'm reaching my full potential. So, giving them that vision of a positive future is so important to help them cope and come out of this okay.
Absolutely, and so much so for children in so many conflict zones who are experiencing this. Sonia Kush, really good to speak to you. Thank you.